Lotu-Liga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this bill also. I rise to support the bill because, as has been acknowledged across this House, the bill was required to consolidate the industry and bring it under Prudential supervision. Mr. Speaker, it is a bill that is part of a suite of reforms that this government, this national government, has put in place to return confidence and trust back to our capital markets, to return the confidence and trust back to our businesses, our export businesses in particular. Sir, this bill replaces outdated and disjointed legislation. It fills some of the gaps that currently exist in the prudential regulation of this industry, and it removes some of the inconsistencies that are in the legislation for the insurance sector. What it does is, in a light-handed way, sir, it provides for the delivery of regulation so that we don't mire the industry in a sort of compliance mentality. It focuses, Mr. Speaker, on licensing and prudential regulation, as many of the speakers have already alluded to. Especially, sir, it provides for all insurers to be licensed and supervised by the Reserve Bank and to comply with their prudential regulations. The Reserve Bank will act as both the regulator and the supervisor. As I've already stated, it's part of a suite to promote the sound and efficient insurance industry and promote confidence because, sir, this year we've already provided legislation for financial service providers, financial advisors. We are reforming securities trustees legislation, the Financial Market Authority. That bill will be in the House later this year, sir, and it is part of a comprehensive review of securities markets, which will be the Securities Act in particular, which will be coming to this House early next year. The bill covers, of course, a number of categories of insurers: life, non-life and medical. It did present some issues, particularly amongst those non-resident insurers and foreign insurance companies that we had to deal with in terms of providing for a level playing field for our local insurers, which some of the speakers have already alluded to. And in considering those matters, I thank the officials, some of them are here, for the work that they did in what is a reasonably complex area of the law, and the work of the Select Committee in assessing some of those complex issues. We heard about 31 submissions orally, and 57 were submitted in written form. And I commend the industry for bringing a lot of those submissions and a lot of the issues that were contained in the initial bill to our committee, and the nature of their submissions was quite comprehensive. So what does it do? I just want to touch briefly on a couple of issues because we will be dealing with specific clauses in the committee stage. But one was to put outside the scope of the bill certain types of categories of provider. And we've already heard there were discretionary mutuals, trade associations, union groups, and the reason is that they provide sort of limited coverage, which was incidental to their primary purpose, and that's really important. We had similar carve-outs in the financial services providers legislation, which we dealt with earlier last month. And similarly, it was important to recognise that we don't want to over-regulate those enterprises and organisations that don't properly fit within the category of insurance companies. We also dealt with the sort of smaller type insurance companies, in order that we limited some of the exemptions there because we wanted to manage some of the compliance costs that these types of businesses experience. There are a whole host of other recommendations in our report back to the House. One of them was, of course, the Reserve Bank would publish a list of approved overseas regulators for assessing home and host regulatory recognition treatment of branches of overseas insurers. That was particularly important too, Sir. Sir, it is a bill which obviously has received widespread support across this House. It's a bill that did start under the last government, but we are happy as a national government to take it on and implement it and enact this bill. I commend it to the House.
Point of order, Chris Tremaine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before we vote this particular piece of legislation, I seek your advice. Given recent announcements regarding expulsions within the Labour Party caucus, I want to be clear about the numbers that will be voting on this particular piece of legislation.
Order. That's not a point of order. The matter of how people cast their votes is entirely in the hands of the whip, as that member well knows. That member is responsible for making sure that he has sufficient people in the House and votes accordingly. This is a matter of trust, and by raising the question, you are asking the question and doubting the trust of other whips. I don't think that fits very well with the colour of this place. It's always been taken when the whips speak with honour, and I won't have anybody broach that. Okay, members, the question is that the motion be agreed to. Those who are of that opinion will say aye. The contrary opinion will say no. The ayes have it.
Insurance Prudential Supervision Bill, second reading.
This bill is set down for committee stage next sitting day. I call now on Government Order of the Day number 3.
Interrupted debate on the first reading of the legislation bill.